Okay, guys, so I'm going to go ahead and run through the problems that are here on this assignment. You should have already turned this in, but just in case you haven't, we'll go ahead and make sure that we check it. Okay, so I'm going to run through the examples that aren't currently worked. So again, I'm sure that you saw these before. If you turn in the assignment, you definitely saw these before. So example number 1 here says, what is the midpoint between the points -3, 1 and 3.51? So we need to make sure that we write our formula. So our midpoint is x1 plus x2 over 2 and the comma y1 plus y2 over 2. So we're finding the average of these 2 points. Now, if you remember from the last time we did this, I did rewrite the formula a little bit to make it easier to find endpoints. So it's the x of the midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2 over 2. And the y of the midpoint is going to be y1 plus y2. And I'm sorry for that little edit there because Lily was being crazy. So let's make our list. So we have our x1, x2, x of the midpoint. And actually, let's go ahead and like we used to, because it's x1, x of the midpoint, and then x2. Because if you think about it, the midpoint's in the middle. So our x1 will be -3, and our x2 is going to be 3.5, and our midpoint x is unknown. So now we're going to plug these into the formula, list formula substitution. So x of the midpoint is equal to x1, which is -3, plus x2, which is 3.5, divided by 2. -3 plus 3.5 is 0.5 divided by 2, and that's going to equal 0.25 or 1 over 4. So the x of the midpoint is 1 over 4. And do the same thing for the y. So we have y2, or sorry, y1, y of the midpoint, y2. All right, so y1 is 1, y2 is 1, and the y of the midpoint is technically unknown at this point. So y of the midpoint is equal to 1 plus 1 divided by 2. 1 plus 1, of course, is 2, and 2 over 2 is 1. So our midpoint should be 1/4, 1. Okay, so example 3 gives us a line segment AB with midpoint M. Okay, and it tells us that we have point A and the midpoint, but we do not have point B. So we have x1 is 1, x of the midpoint is 3, and the x2 is what we're solving for. That's our unknown. So our formula was x of the midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2 over 2. And so let's go ahead and put in our known values. So x of the midpoint is 3, and that's equal to 1 plus our unknown x. All right, so now we have 1 plus x, 2, over 2 is equal to 3. To get rid of the denominator, we multiply by the denominator because it's dividing by 2. 2 times 3 is 6. These 2's cancel. Equals x2 plus 1. Subtract the 1 from both sides. And 5 is our x2. So same thing for y. Y of the midpoint is equal to y1 plus y2 over 2. And we know that y1 is -4, and y of the midpoint is 2, and we're looking for y2. All right, so remember, make your list, do your formula, substitute in. So y of the midpoint is 2, y1 is -4, and y2 is unknown. We need to get rid of our denominator of 2, so we're going to multiply both sides by 2. 2 times 2 is 4, is equal to -4 plus y2. Add 4 to both sides, and we're going to get 8 is equal to y2. So point B is 5, 8. That's for the example problem. Now remember, you had practice problems that you were assigned to do. All right, so here's the first practice problem. It says, what is the midpoint of the line segment with endpoints M and E? I really hate that they used M, but what can we do? So we are looking for the midpoint. That's what we're looking for. And we are given the endpoints. We need to make sure we pay attention to what we're given and what we're looking for. So let's go ahead and solve for our x values. So we're going to have our x1, x2, and so let's go ahead and make that list. So we have x1 equals -5. X of the midpoint is still unknown, and x2 is 4. All right, so we have x of the midpoint is equal to x2, or sorry, x1 plus x2 divided by 2. X of the midpoint is -5 plus 4 over 2. -5 plus 4 is -1 over 2. You can put -1 over 2 or -0.5. I would always recommend go ahead and put that 0 in for the whole number position for the ones place, because several of you wrote -5. You forgot your decimal. So you need to make sure you're paying attention to what you're doing there. So our x value is -1/2. Okay, now let's figure out the y value. So we have our y1, y2. Make our list of our givens. y1 is 8. Y of the midpoint is still unknown. And y2 is -2. All right, so y of the midpoint is going to equal y1, which is 8, plus y2, which is -2, divided by 2. -8 or 8 plus -2 is 6 over 2. So y of the midpoint is 3, and our midpoint is -1/2, 3. All right, number 2 says triangle JKL is shown on or is drawn on the grid below. What is the midpoint of side KL? So we need to make sure we only care about that side, which is this side right here. So we need to find out what this point is and this point is. Now, many of your answers, guys, were points that were not even on this line or anywhere on this triangle. For example, several people put 0.5, 0.5. That's right here on the grid, in the middle of the triangle. You were looking for the midpoint of this line that I have sketched in blue here. So K is -1, 6, and L is 4, 0. Now, some of you may have put 5 because it was hard to read. I did note that on your assignment if that's what you did, so you can go back and fix it. So I'm going to call K my point 1 and L my point 2. So let's find the midpoint. X of the midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2 over 2. Make our list. X1 is -1. X of the midpoint is still unknown, and x2 is 4. So plug into our formula. X of the midpoint is equal to -1 plus 4 over 2, and -1 plus 4 is 3 over 2. So the answer is either going to be 3 over 2 or 1.5 is also acceptable. So our X value is 1.5 or 3 over 2. Now we need to do the y values. So y of the midpoint equals y1 plus y2 over 2. Y of the midpoint, y1 is going to be 6. Y of the midpoint is unknown. And y2 is 0. So this one actually makes things a little bit easier for us. So y of the midpoint is equal to 6 plus 0 divided by 2. Now 6 plus 0, guys, is 6, of course. And 6 over 2 is 3. So our point is 1.53. And what we can do is see here is we can see that point is on this line. All right, and the last question that can be worked out mathematically is number 3. It says line segment AB has midpoint M, gives me the coordinates of endpoint A as -1, 2, and the midpoint is 0, -3. So first off, guys, go ahead and sketch a picture of what you're seeing here. So we have point A, point B, and we have a midpoint. We are given A and the midpoint. B is unknown to us at this time. We don't know what B is. So we need to make sure we're paying attention to what we're being asked, because on this problem, a lot of people actually found the midpoint between A and M, and that is not what we were looking for here. We were looking for what are the coordinates of point B. So make sure you're paying attention. So we have our x1, our y1, our x of the midpoint, and our y of the midpoint. X2 is unknown, Y2 is unknown. So let's go ahead and solve for the X. So our formula was X of the midpoint is equal to X1 plus X2 divided by 2. We know that X of the midpoint is 0 and X1 is -1. So we're going to plug these into our formula. So 0 is equal to -1 plus our unknown value, all divided by 2. We are solving for x2, so that means we do need to make sure we undo this division here using inverse operations. Remember, inverse of division is multiplication. All right, so 2 times 0, of course, is 0. Anything times 0 is 0. This 2 on the outside of the parentheses here cancels the denominator because anything divided by itself is 1. So all right, we get 0 is equal to -1 plus x2. -1, the inverse of subtraction, or the negative, is to add it. And we get that 1 is equal to x. Okay, so we're going to put a 1 here in our answer. All right, so now we need to figure out y of the midpoint, or y2. We know that y1 is 2, and we know that y of the midpoint is -3. And again, we don't know what y2 is. So plug these numbers that we do know into our formula. So y of the midpoint is -3. Y1 is 2 plus our y2, which is unknown, divided by 2. We need to do the inverse operation to get rid of the 2 that's in the denominator, so multiply both sides by 2. 2 times -3 is -6 equals 2 plus y2. And then at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to subtract 2 from both sides, because remember, we want to get y2, our unknown value. Our unknown value needs to be in isolation like the rest of us, okay? So we need to make sure it gets by itself. So 2 minus 2 is 0. And now y2 is by himself. -6 minus 2 is -8. So our final answer for this problem is going to be 1, -8. That is our end point. So go through your submission. If you don't feel like you did well enough on it, go through your submission, redo your answers, and resubmit it. You can have full credit if you do that, but I do need you to make sure you go through and try and work these problems out again. That's all for right now. I will be posting a video with the example problems from this week fairly shortly, but not the practice problems. Practice problems I will post next week. So make sure you try them before I give you the answers. Talk to you later. Bye.